when the saints go marching in.
Vox Fidei brings you into the inner life of the Word made flesh. Father Chris guides us in the lives of the saints in Saintly series.
Welcome to Saintly series. Today, 4th of October, we celebrate St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis was born in the small town of Assisi, Italy, in 1181, into a very wealthy family. He was baptized and named Giovanni in honor of St. John the Baptist. He was later named Francesco or Frenchy by his father, Pietro de Bedone, when he returned home from trading in France, because he was in France when Francis was born. Francesco grew up in this middle-class home that engaged in the sale of fine clothes. He was a skilled merchant in the family business, but he enjoyed spending money more than earning it. He was a man about town, a leader amongst his friends, and well liked for his concern for others. At the age of 20, Francis joined a civic-minded army of Assisi that was constantly in battle against a neighboring city, Perugia. At one battle, Assisi was defeated, and many were taken as prisoners of war, including Francis. Francis was spared death, and instead of being killed, he was held for a ransom, and he was kept in a dungeon for a whole year until the ransom was paid. After the payment, he returned to Assisi a more reflective man, even though he still stood his ground of being a soldier. He now joined the military service for the Papal States. But this ended when Francis was on his horse, heading for battle, and heard a commanding voice, commanding him to follow the master rather than the man. He came back, sold his expensive armor and horse, and returned home and began to spend time in prayer. Shortly after this, St. Francis met a leper by the road one day on the outskirts of Assisi, and he disembarked his horse and gave money to the leper and kissed the leper's rotting hands. This marked the beginning of his frequent visits to lepers at home and in hospitals. One day in 1202, while he was praying in the church of San Damiano, he heard a voice from the crucifix saying to him, "Francis, go and repair my church, which, as you can see, is in ruins." Taking this literally, Francis sold all his clothes, sold his father's royal clothes, and his father's horse at a neighboring market, got back to Assisi now, and handed the proceeds to a priest in the church of San Damiano, asking him to use this money to repair the church. St. Francis's father was angry at this, for his son had sold the family store, the clothes in the store, and even a horse, and he had given the money away. This was not to be accepted, so his father demanded for the money. The father took him to the bishop, and judgment was to be made against Francis and his action, for this was considered stealing. So at the bishop's court, it was judgment time. Francis was put in prison until he made restitution, but it wasn't possible. And so a dramatic scene unfolds between Francis and his father in the church square, in the presence of the bishop, Bishop Guido of Assisi, and his entire court. As Francis was asked for the money, Francis stood speechless without the money, and the bishop ruled that the church cannot accept stolen money. "Francis, you must return the money." Francis then returned the coins that he had, and one after the other, to the sight of everyone, he removed every cloth until he was naked, a gesture of total renunciation of his inheritance. And Francis said to his father, "From now on, I will not call you my father. I will not say, my father Pietro Berdone, but our Father who art in heaven." Francis eventually began to live as a hermit, wearing rough smoke and begging alms for food. He also reconstructed 3 nearby dilapidated churches through manual work. And he will preach repentance in the streets of Assisi. He also will preach to animals and birds where there was no one to listen to him. He won the admiration of many who decided to follow his lifestyle. This led to the institution of the first Franciscan order called the Little Brothers of Assisi. This was on the 16th of April 1209. They were to own nothing personally. Francis was later ordained a deacon, but never a priest. He was ardent in his love for the Holy Eucharist and insisted that the church must be kept in honor of the Lord's physical presence. The first ever Christmas crib was created by St. Francis in a cave in Greccio. This was in 1223. And in 1224, at about the feast of the exaltation of the cross, during his moments spent in contemplation and prayer on the Passion of Christ, Francis was blessed with imprints of the sacred wounds of the crucified Lord on his body, the stigmata. He was the first in history to carry such wounds, though many people believe that they were not wounds of stigmata, but they were signs of leprosy. He also suffered blindness. One interesting part of the life of Francis is his conception of nature as the very mirror and image of God. And so, in his famous Canticle of the Brother Sun, he referred to the sun as brother, and the moon as sister, and the earth as mother. The papal encyclical of Pope Francis, Laudato Si', takes its roots from this Canticle of Brother Sun. At the death of Francis, he repeatedly exclaimed, "Praise be you, O Lord, for our sister death." Francis died on the 3rd of October, 1226, at the age of 44. St. Francis's life stands as an ideal for Christian living in virtue and poverty. His life is a mark of social justice and the care and concern for the poor and the weak. The fact that he abandoned the riches from his family to pursue the plan of God for his life is a clear reminder to us that the love of God ought to supersede everything nature. It is also a call on us to learn to love nature, to treat all of nature, animals and plants and other resources of the earth with love and care as they are part of God's creation. We must see the earth as our common home. The date of canonization is 16th of July, 1228, 2 years after his death, by Pope Gregory IX. He is the patron saint of ecologists, the patron saint of zoologists, of animals, and merchants. He is the co-patron of Italy. The color of the day is white. Oh, the pontificate of Pope Francis right now is modeled after the life of St. Francis of Assisi and his teachings. What we offer the saints is veneration. Peace be with you. I am Father Chris, Vox Fidei.
when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in.
Vox Fidei, God is in charge.